I didn't go to the bank looking for answers. I went because there were bills to pay, forms to sign, and a life that didn't pause just because my wife had died. 38 years of marriage ended quietly on a Tuesday morning in March. No dramatic last words, no warnings, just a heart that stopped while she slept. Margaret always handled the paperwork. "Don't worry, Tom," she used to say. "I've got it covered." She'd said that for decades. The banker was polite in the careful way people get around grief. He slid the small metal box across the desk like it might bite me. "Safe deposit box 417, he said, "registered solely to your wife." That should have been the first warning. Inside were the things you'd expect: her wedding ring wrapped in tissue, old insurance policies, a yellowed envelope labeled Taxes 2011 in her neat handwriting. And then there was a thin manila folder, no label, just my name written once across the front. Tom. My stomach tightened. Inside were documents I didn't recognize: credit card statements, loan notices, collection warnings, all with my name on them. I laughed once, out loud, there in the bank's private room. "Very funny, Maggie," I muttered. "You scared me." But the numbers didn't joke back. Balances in the tens of thousands, accounts I'd never opened, signatures that looked like mine but weren't. My hands started shaking. At the bottom of the folder was a single letter, folded carefully, addressed to me, dated 6 months before her death. I recognized her handwriting instantly. "Tom, I don't know how to say this out loud. I'm so tired of lying. I thought I could fix it before you ever knew. I was wrong." I had to stop reading. The room felt too small. When I finished the letter, my chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with my heart. Margaret had taken out loans in my name, credit cards, a home equity line. She had forged my signature. She'd done it slowly, quietly, over years, always promising herself it was temporary, always believing the next investment would fix the last mistake. She hadn't spent the money on clothes or trips or anything reckless. She'd tried to save us, and in doing so, she'd destroyed everything. I drove home in silence. The house looked the same as it had every day for decades. Same porch, same wind chimes, same quiet. But I wasn't the same man who'd left that morning. That night, my son called. "Dad," he said gently, "how are you holding up?" I stared at the folder spread across the kitchen table. "I don't know," I said, "but I think your mother was hiding something big." There was a pause, then disbelief. "That doesn't sound like Mom." I closed my eyes. It didn't sound like her to me either, but it's real. Later, my daughter called. She was closer to her mother than anyone. When I told her what I'd found, the line went silent. Finally, she whispered, "Are you sure?" "I have the documents and her letter." "She loved you," my daughter said, voice breaking. "I know, and she also ruined my financial life." Both things were true. When I hung up, the house felt heavier than it had since the funeral. Grief is one thing, but betrayal changes the shape of the world. And this was only the beginning. The first thing I learned was this: grief doesn't protect you from consequences. 3 days after the bank, I sat across from a lawyer named Karen Holt. Mid-50s, sharp eyes, no wasted words. The kind of person who'd seen families tear themselves apart over less than this. She flipped through the documents silently, page after page. Loan agreements, credit applications, forged signatures. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Walker," she said, "your wife committed identity fraud." I nodded slowly. I'd already accepted that part. "And because you're married," she continued, "the creditors will argue you benefited from it." That part hit harder. "So even though I didn't know," I said, "even though I didn't sign, they'll still come after you," she finished. "Your house, your retirement, everything." I felt something cold move through my chest. I was 66 years old, retired, fixed income. I'd done everything right, worked 40 years, paid my taxes, trusted my wife. And now I was looking at financial ruin because I loved someone too much to question her. Karen slid one document back toward me. "There is good news," she said. "Some of this can be challenged, but it won't be quick, and it won't be easy." I left her office with a folder thicker than the one from the bank, and a realization heavier than both. That night, my son Mark came over. He's practical, always has been, engineer brain, likes facts, hates emotions. We spread the paperwork across the dining table. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "Why didn't Mom ask for help?" "I think she was already in too deep," I said. "People don't confess when they still think they can fix it." He nodded slowly. "She always hated looking weak." My daughter Emily didn't come. She sent a text instead. "I need space. I can't handle this right now." I stared at the message longer than I should have. Some people need time to accept the truth. Others need the lie to survive. The next weeks blurred together. Karen filed disputes with the credit bureaus, requested original loan documents, hired a handwriting expert. I learned words I'd never wanted to know: forgery, liability, spousal benefit, fraudulent conveyance. The handwriting expert confirmed what my gut already knew. "These are not your signatures. They're careful imitations." Careful. Like the woman I'd shared a bed with for nearly 4 decades. One afternoon, Karen called. "We have a problem," she said. "The home equity loan, the biggest one. The bank refused to back down. They're claiming you benefited simply by living in the house," she explained. "They want this in court." Court. At my age, against a bank with unlimited lawyers. I hung up and sat in silence. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I updated my resume. It felt ridiculous. Gray hair, arthritis in my hands. Last real job ended 3 years ago. But pride doesn't pay legal fees. I applied everywhere. Hardware store, bookshop, community center. Most never replied. One did. A small family-owned bookstore downtown. The owner was a man named Richard, late 60s, white beard, calm voice. He looked at my resume, then at me. "Why now?" he asked. I could have lied, but I was done with lies. "My wife died. I found out she destroyed our finances. I'm rebuilding from zero." He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Can you start Monday?" That job didn't save me financially, but it saved me from disappearing. Because when everything collapses, what you need most isn't money. It's a place to stand. And I was about to find out just how hard the ground could shake. The court date came faster than I expected. 6 months after my wife's funeral, I stood outside a county courthouse holding a folder thick enough to ruin a man's faith in paperwork forever. Cold morning, gray sky, the kind that presses down on you. My son Mark stood beside me, hands in his jacket pockets. "She still hasn't replied?" he asked. I shook my head. Emily hadn't spoken to me in weeks. Her last message still burned in my phone. "I can't be part of destroying Mom's memory." That sentence hurt more than the debt. Inside the courtroom, everything felt smaller than TV made it look. Wooden benches, fluorescent lights, a judge who looked tired before the day even started. The bank's lawyer went first, young, confident, perfect suit. He spoke like my life was a spreadsheet. "Mr. Walker benefited from the loans," he said.
He lived in the home. He was married to the borrower. Spousal benefit applies. Karen stood slowly. No drama, no raised voice. She laid out the evidence piece by piece. The forged signatures, the handwriting expert's report, the separate accounts in my wife's name only, the letter my wife had written admitting everything. Then Karen called me to the stand. "Mr. Walker," she asked, "did you authorize these loans?" "No." "Did you know they existed?" "No." "Did you receive the money?" "No." The bank's lawyer stood for cross-examination. He smiled politely. "Mr. Walker," he said, "you trusted your wife with finances, correct?" "Yes." "So you chose not to be involved?" I met his eyes. "I trusted her," I said. "I didn't consent to being defrauded." A murmur moved through the room. He leaned in. "You expect this court to believe that after nearly 40 years of marriage you suspected nothing?" That was the question, the one that had kept me awake for months. I took a breath. "My wife was careful," I said, "organized, respected. She hid mistakes behind competence. I believed her because that's what love looked like to me at the time. But trust is not permission to steal someone's identity." The judge leaned back. The room went quiet. After a short recess, we were called back in. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked directly at me. "I've reviewed the evidence," he said. "The signatures were forged. The funds were concealed. The fraud is clear." My heart pounded. "I rule in favor of the defendant," he continued. "The loans are void. The liens are released." Mark grabbed my arm. I didn't smile. Relief doesn't always look like happiness. Sometimes it looks like exhaustion. Outside the courthouse, my phone rang. Emily. I answered immediately. "Dad," she said, voice shaking, "I went to the bank today. I wanted to prove you were wrong." I closed my eyes. "And?" I asked. "There's a credit card in my name," she whispered. "I never opened it. $23,000. Silence sat between us. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I should have believed you." "Both things can be true," I said gently. "She loved us, and she made terrible choices." She came over that night. We sat at the same table where I'd once signed Christmas cards beside her mother. Now we sorted documents instead. Truth has a way of bringing people back together after it breaks them apart. The next morning I went back to the bookstore. Same shelves, same quiet, but I wasn't the same man, because I'd learned something important. Surviving betrayal isn't about winning. It's about standing up when everything tells you to sit down and disappear. And my story wasn't over yet, not even close.
I thought winning in court would be the end. The debt was gone, the house was safe, my name was clean. That's what victory's supposed to look like. But the truth doesn't stop moving just because a judge says case closed. It spreads, quietly. 3 weeks after the ruling, I got my first unexpected visitor. I was shelving books at a small independent bookstore downtown, part-time work I'd taken because retirement had collapsed along with my finances. The bell over the door rang, and a woman stood there, maybe mid-40s, eyes red, hands clenched around her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Do you work here?" she asked. "I do," I said. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Someone told me you understand financial stuff, marriage stuff." I didn't ask who sent her. I just nodded. We sat at the small reading table near the window. She talked for nearly an hour, about accounts she wasn't allowed to see, about passwords she didn't know, about being told she was bad with numbers and should just trust her husband. Every sentence felt familiar. When she finished, she looked at me like she was waiting for a verdict. "You're not crazy, and you're not alone." She cried.
After she left, Ruth, the bookstore owner, watched me quietly. "You're good at that," she said. "At what?" "Listening, believing people." I shrugged. I know what it's like not to be believed. Word spread. Not online, not publicly. The old way. One person telling another, "There's a guy at the bookstore. He gets it." Men came too. Retired guys, laid-off guys, guys who'd let someone else handle the money for decades, and suddenly realized they didn't know their own financial life. I never gave legal advice. I gave something else. Permission to look. Permission to ask questions. Permission to stop feeling ashamed. At home, Emily and Mark came by more often. We talked, really talked, about their mother, about the good memories and the bad truths, about how love doesn't erase harm, and harm doesn't erase love. Both can exist. That took time for them to accept. It took time for me, too. One night, Emily asked quietly, "Do you ever wish you hadn't opened the box?" I thought about it, about the ignorance that once felt like peace. "No," I said, "because that peace wasn't real. It was just quiet." She nodded, understanding more than she said. The support group started accidentally. 3 people became 5, 5 became 10. We met once a month in the bookstore after closing. Folding chairs, coffee, no speeches, just stories. Men and women who had been controlled, manipulated, lied to, sometimes by people they still loved. One night someone asked me, "How did you survive it?" I answered honestly. I didn't feel strong. I felt scared, angry, lost. I just kept moving forward because stopping felt worse. That seemed to help them more than any motivational speech ever could. A year passed, not cleanly, not neatly, but forward. On what would have been my 39th wedding anniversary, I went to a bank my wife had never used. I opened an account, in my name only. The teller smiled. "Anything else today, sir?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to update the name." I gave her my full name, not the married version, the original one, the one I'd been before I trusted someone else to define my life. When I walked out, the air felt lighter, not because the past was gone, but because it no longer owned me. And that's when I realized something unexpected. I hadn't just survived the betrayal. I'd become proof that it was possible to rebuild after it. And that scared some people, but it gave hope to others. And hope has a way of changing what comes next. I used to think endings were loud. A courtroom ruling, a confession, an apology that finally arrived. But real endings don't announce themselves. They settle in slowly, like dust after a storm. 2 years passed, not in big leaps, in ordinary days. Morning coffee, shelving books, monthly meetings in the back room of the bookstore. The support group never got a name. We didn't want one. Names turned things into organizations, and organizations turned people into numbers. We were just people who'd been lied to and decided not to stay silent anymore. Some came once and never returned. Some stayed. A few rebuilt their lives completely. One man in his 70s told us, "I spent 40 years letting someone else tell me I was bad with money. Turns out, I was just never allowed to look." That sentence stayed with me. Emily changed too. She stopped defending the version of her mother that couldn't exist alongside the truth. She started accepting that love and harm can share the same face. One evening she said, "I wish I'd believed you sooner." "You believed when it mattered," I told her. That was true. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I'd made space for who I was now. I replaced the kitchen table, same shape, different wood. I framed one photo from my marriage, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. I didn't rewrite the past. I integrated it. People still asked, "Do you hate her?" "No," I'd say. "I understand her." Understanding isn't forgiveness, and forgiveness isn't required for healing. One afternoon, Ruth poured us both coffee and said, "You know, you changed this place." I looked around at the bookstore. The chairs, the shelves, the women laughing softly in the back room, the men asking questions they'd never been allowed to ask. "I didn't plan to," I said. "That's usually how the important things happen," she replied. On my birthday, I did something small but symbolic. I updated my will, not because I had much, but because I wanted clarity. No secrets, no confusion, no silence masquerading as peace. I left instructions, clear ones. I wrote letters, too, not confessions, explanations, truths spoken calmly, without blame. Because silence protects the wrong people, and truth, spoken gently, protects everyone else. That night, I sat on the porch, listening to the quiet, not the dangerous quiet, the honest kind, the kind that comes after you've said what needed to be said. If there's one thing I learned, it's this: being underestimated is not a weakness, it's a position. From there, you can see clearly who benefits from your silence. And when you finally speak, when you finally look, everything shifts. I didn't win, I endured. And sometimes endurance is the only victory that lasts. He thought erasing me would end the story. He didn't know I was the one holding the final page. He thought the story was over. He was wrong. If you enjoyed this true style story, hit like, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Because the quiet ones always have the last word.